Death Care CEO Brian Thompson was smoked in broad daylight, and the entire country proceeded to laugh and celebrate. Brian Thompson is absolute human scum who made his fortune denying Americans health care. Remember, my friends, health insurance companies make money every time they deny someone's claim. So the goal of a health insurance company is to deny as many people health care so they can maximize profits. And no one in the industry is as good at denying Americans health care than Brian Thompson. His company led the industry in rejected healthcare claims. According to old pre-COVID studies, over 68,000 Americans die each year because they don't have access to healthcare. People like Brian Thompson are the biggest criminals in our society. Most Americans do hard-working and honest jobs. Healthcare CEOs are parasitic leeches who make their fortune spreading misery and death. Brian Thompson got exactly what he deserved. And this story gets even spicier because the bullets that the assassin used to kill the Death Care CEO had encoded messages in them. Deny, defend, and depose was etched on the bullets that was used to kill the Death Care CEO. The assassin who killed Brian Thompson was apparently the fucking Riddler. What an absolute legend. We should all have a good time and laugh at this story because we need to send our criminal ruling class a message about how we really feel about this. If you don't want people to laugh and celebrate after you die, what you should do is live a life full of honor. Healthcare CEOs live a dishonorable life, and I hope they rest in peace. What's poppin'? What's poppin'? What's poppin', my friends? Welcome to another edition of RBN Live on Friday. You guys know I'm always in the lab cooking. That was just another example. Oh boy, and we on fire at Hotspot right now. And I've been greatly enjoying the news coverage. And that's what we're going to talk about in the first part of the show. Is the ruling class coping with the fact that we are going through this mass awareness? There's a massive awareness event going on right now of class consciousness, because in the light of this story, you have the ruling class realizing how much they are hated. The health insurance companies, how much they're hated. The ruling class realize they can't get away with murdering people by pen the way they used to. And right now they're in shambles, melting down about the massive working class holiday, damn near celebration over the death of a parasite. And a lot of people on CNN and the corporate media, they are perplexed about why people are so upset. And this graph, in a nutshell, is exactly why the working class is more than happy to celebrate the death of someone like Brian Thompson, who made a fortune off of misery and death. And in the term deny, defend, and depose is becoming a working class rallying cry. Right, like, bro, the amount of memes, images, videos, references to this 3-word term, defy, defend, and depose, became a cultural icon among the American working class immediately. And now, seeing all this, the CEO class is hilariously in shambles. I saw this headline earlier today. What a time to be alive. What a time to be alive. Look at this glorious headline. Top security firm inundated with calls after execution of United Healthcare CEO Brian Thompson as CEOs fear for their lives. Now, I've been waiting my entire life. I've been waiting my entire life to hear or see the words in a headline that states CEOs fear for their lives. Can we just take a second and appreciate this moment that we're living through? I'm going to read that part again. As CEOs fear for their lives. New York Post they've been going through some things. Fox News and the ruling class been going through some things. CVS removes photos of executives from its website in wake of United Healthcare CEO assassination. The fact that these motherfuckers have been so bold to walk among us and to identify themselves have been a massive lapse on our part, I guess. Right now, CEOs are so terrified. Security companies are booming immediately afterwards. Good. Let them be forced. Let them be forced to live in their sheltered security detail echo chambers. That's the best thing that we want this fear. We want to send a message to the capitalist class that they do not monopolize violence. I want all violence to end. But as long as state violence, as long as capitalist violence, as long as death by pen stroke is still a thing, they need to have some fear in them. And now there are even rumors that there are even corporate executives that even talking about having reforms. They're talking about reforming the health insurance industry. Dude, these motherfuckers are so afraid. Before I get to the CNN segment, these motherfuckers are so afraid. They are requesting to have their Wikipedia pages removed. Look at this. David Joyner, CVS executive. If you look here in the middle, you can see that the editor requested that this article be pulled. Boy, they are afraid. They are about to go in the shadows in the night, my friend. So this era of them being out in the open, screwing the working class, it has to end. And this fear is amazing. And now you have all the class loyal chuds. Like the Republican meltdown on this is hilarious. I'm gonna show you guys a CNN story to show you kind of like the more of the mild panic that's coming through the ruling class. Then you have people like Matt Walsh, like one of the biggest culture warriors in the world. Like this is just an example of kind of unhinged nonsense you're seeing from these people who are afraid of the anger of the working class. So what capitalists do, they push the culture war. And I say capitalists because people are confused when they assume that liberals are the only one who do it. No one plays culture war bullshit more than conservatives, Republicans. They engage in white identity politics all the time. And it's weird that people don't call them out for this. Their whole politics is white identity politics. That's how they trick poor working white people to vote for them. Poor white people to vote for them, to vote against their interests, the culture war, which is why we reject the application, the use of the culture war. That is what it's used for. This is Matt Walsh. The left is outright praising the first-degree murder of a health insurance CEO because he's a white male. If he was a CEO of the same company but was a black woman, you would not be seeing any gloating and celebration. You guys see where these people organize on? These people organize based on their white identity. Is it because he's a white male?
or because 68,000 Americans die each year because they don't have health care, because countless people go bankrupt because they have their insurance claims revoked. Now, so this is why we are going after MAGA. The people who are sympathetic to MAGA, I mean, this is something that I wish my friend Jimmy would have called him out on. Because I agree with Jimmy's criticism that liberals engage in identity politics too much. But if you have this guy on, you got to grill this motherfucker about that too. Because the right pushes identity politics as much as anyone else. They use it to divide the working class more than anyone else. For example, trans people, it's like 0.2% of the population is trans. Which is why people are like, Nick, why don't you talk about the trans issue more? Because it's fucking irrelevant. The fuck? Why are we having a massive fight among the working class over such a small percentage of the population? There's like fucking 4 trans athletes in the whole country. But we dividing the working class over these irrelevant fucking issues. And I mentioned here, what's exactly the difference between you and a social justice warrior liberal? You guys are two sides of the same coin. So on the Republican side, you know, the side that's against identity politics, apparently, they're just having an identity politics meltdown. Oh my God, the country is cheering the death of white men. That's how they spin it, my friends. Now I'm gonna show you guys the liberal class who, at least they're having a little bit more identity about this, right? But I'm gonna show you guys just the pure panic. And what's even more disgusting about this, and reason why I have no love for any of these people, these are the same people who they morally pontificate and they openly cheer the Israeli genocide in Gaza. They openly lie and they give no fucks about dead Palestinians, about Americans who are homeless, going bankrupt, who die because they don't have access to health care. They don't give a single fuck about any of that, but they want to mourn a fucking billionaire. Then they're like, oh, what about his family? What about his family? What about the family of the innocent black man who was executed in Missouri earlier this year, who was proven innocent? And despite record amount of senators, our governor still didn't pardon him. CNN didn't run the story on it. There have been countless innocent men being killed on death row. CNN is not covering any of that. But they want us to have sympathy for the ruling class? Fuck him and his kids. They will be all right. It's extremely healthy, and this is what my viral tweet I had not too long ago. It's extremely healthy to hate the ruling class. Hating the ruling class is self-love. I'm playing a video. I'm going to show you guys how the corporate media is coping with this.
Healthcare CEO Brian Thompson was gunned down in New York, and that massive manhunt is still underway for his killer in what police are calling a calculated and premeditated attack. In a new statement, the United Healthcare Group says this, quote, while our hearts are broken, we have been touched by the huge outpouring of kindness and support in the hours since this horrific crime took place. But this killing has generated a very different reaction from some on the internet. Just take a look at some of these comments found under a CNN video about this story online. These are just a few, among dozens of hateful comments.
So this is the meltdown we are seeing. We are seeing corporate media, and there's so many tweets where these corporations, like the blue check accounts, they're sending our condolences to Brian Thompson, and then they're getting massively ratioed. So this is CNN. Just for a second time, I can only show you one. And I have my guest here, the amazing Dr. Sabrina. I'm going to introduce you here very soon, my friend. But you guys see the meltdown that's come from corporate media when they are realizing that their own subscriber base. And guys, it's a mass awareness event, the likes that I have never seen before, because there are suburban moms, people who are not even my class allies, suburbanites that are like, yeah, fuck them. All the CEOs deserve to die. And I'm like, what the hell? You got suburbanites that say that's cheering on this guy. Well, I just say justice being brought. I just say. So let me play a little bit of this video, and then I'll introduce my guests after we watch just a little bit of this.
That we found, including one saying, quote, sorry, my sympathy is out of network.
That's a banger. I mean, that's a commonly used comment, but that's an absolute banger. And you know there are countless CNN employees Not the millionaires you about to see on screen. That is cracking up. But anyway, let's continue.
The New York Times writes this, quote, "The dark commentary after the death of the 50-year-old insurance executive from Maple Grove, Minnesota, highlighted the anger and frustration over the state of healthcare in America, where those with private insurance often find themselves in Kafkaesque tangles while seeking reimbursement for medical treatment and are often denied." And that frustration is something that doctors say they've seen from patients throughout their careers.
I see people when they're at their lowest, when the system has failed them, and I'm frankly not surprised. They feel abandoned, they feel exploited, they feel lied to when it comes to the healthcare system, and especially insurances, because of the things you mentioned: denials, prior authorization, narrow networks, the cost of healthcare. It's been going on and bottling up for a long time.
The most ridiculous system known to man. But I'll play a little bit more and I'll move on. The most ridiculous system that Americans put up. The only country in the world that puts up with this. And that's why I remember I was talking to Jimmy a while ago where I was explaining how like the Tories in the UK. The UK is an extremely right-wing country. It's a right-wing genocidal country. You guys understand that the right-wing party in the UK, their position is that they support the DHS. Now, they support a lot of privatization with it, but they can't say they oppose single-payer healthcare in the UK. That's how far right the United States is, where right-wing parties in Europe can't do that or it'll cost them elections. The Tories do this thing where they pretend they're not against it. You know what I mean? They can't openly say they're against the DHS. I'll just play one more clip. I need to get my guests in here. One more clip.
So our panel's back. Annie Linsky, we're going to be clear here about the tragedy that is
guys, my bad.
Mr. Thompson and his family.
My bad.
Right?
I misspoke.
And set that aside. But what we do see in the wake of this is an outpouring of anger around the way people have been treated by these companies. Now, we're again going to be clear. We are not saying that this justifies any sort of violence at all. But this conversation has really exploded. I mean, my family's talking about it.
Absolutely, mine is too. I mean, of course.
But their family's talking about it. I ended there. Their family's talking about it. We have Suburban nights. There's a mass awareness event. And guys, this is huge because the mass awareness event, these are what is necessary to enact social change in the future. Right now, there's a big conversation going on about health insurance companies ripping people off, and it's great to see. Either way, I want to get my guests in here. I may cover this segment more in detail later because this segment is funny. One of the people on this panel, that black guy, I believe, he talked about how, man, yeah, there's serious conversations right now about how there need to be reform in the health insurance system. So violence worked. So a health insurance CEO was gunned down, and now there's talk among the health insurance industry. Well, and to be clear, honest, obviously, now my solution is not reform. I want to tear it down. But what does it say that they are now talking about reforms after one of their own got gunned down? Anyway, I ended there. Let me introduce my guest, amazing educator and activist. Thank you for joining us once again, Dr. Sabrina. It's great to have you join us on RBN. Once again, thank you for joining us.
Thanks so much, Nick. It's so lovely to be back. I really enjoyed our last conversation, so I was excited for this.
Yeah, and there's been so many updates, especially in the Middle East with the genocide in Israel. There's so much to talk about. And after our first conversation, I definitely had to bring you back on, so I'm glad that you was able to make time. And the first thing I want to ask you about, doing a hard pivot, Zionists are melting down once again, as always, because Amnesty International, it took them 14 months. It took them 14 whole months to finally state that there is a genocide in Gaza. And I want to get your take about what's going on in this full-fledged rebellion by the Zionist state against international law. And it's always interesting to me when they accuse people who unapologetically support the Palestinian cause of being terrorist supporters, as we have senators openly declaring that they want to invade, murder. What's the implication? They want to murder people in the international court for holding Israel accountable. So there's a lot to discuss. I want to get your initial thoughts about Amnesty International and your general thoughts about what's going on in Gaza right now. Thank you for joining me once again, Dr. Sabrina.
Of course, thank you. Well, I just want to, since we're talking about Amnesty, which is all about humanitarian law, right, and humanitarianism, and I was very interested in the topic that you were covering before. I just wanted to add to the topic from before.
If you want,
CEO.
go ahead.
Yeah, I just wanted to add that, it's so interesting when humanity and humanitarianism is evoked when it comes to the killing of a white man. Now, all of a sudden, where you see, the most common kind of like comments that I'm seeing all over social media are, he was a human being, he was a person. Where's our humanity, right? Like, we're supposed to have our humanity evoked for this one white man who was technically a killer of so many people through his policies, right? And this is an example of white collar crime, right? This is what happens. We focus so much on blue collar criminals, people who are from the lower socioeconomic statuses, that when it comes to white collar criminals, when it comes to like CEOs and top notch, like C-suite leaders, then all of a sudden it's not criminality, right? So we have seen the dehumanization of hundreds of thousands of Muslims, Palestinians, Arabs, and absolutely anyone who stands with Palestinians or against genocide. So there's been this mass dehumanization happening, yet for the last 24 hours, there's been this like humanization propaganda.
That's such a great point. That's such a great point. I'm glad you brought it up, because we were talking about this yesterday. You notice that they still have a 24-hour manhunt for this guy who murdered the CEO. Meanwhile, there are women, and I know a personal friend, so this is like very close to my heart, who women report being raped, police off, whatever. We can't find nothing we can do about it. No, we can do about it. Oh, you assault, oh no, we can do about it. Police don't solve crimes. Meanwhile, they got a full-fledged manhunt for this guy, because they doing news reports. It's 24 hours. They're like, oh, we're trying our best to find this guy. We're looking at all these security footage. You notice how much they are and how obsessed they are bringing justice for this guy. Meanwhile, Benjamin Netanyahu can give a speech at Congress, and he's an indicted war criminal.
So, Nick, I actually watched this really excellent documentary on Netflix the other day, and I was going to share it on my social media anyway, but I'll tell you about it. It's called Power. I don't know if you've seen it already, and it basically deconstructs and digs deep into this, the police force and the origins of the police, like going back to slave mobs, and so the point of that show, or the point of me sharing, this documentary, is this idea that the police, we've been told that the police exist for the safety of the community, but really it only serves the interests of the corporate elite, the rich, the property owners, the white people, the upper crust of society, and the main thing is the people who hold power. Right. So we know, and I can tell you, this already, that, power asserts itself in many different ways. There are Black and brown people who assert power or have proximity to power, which gives them privilege, who then, oppress their own people. So, power gets utilized in many different ways, not just by white people, but those who have a proximity to it. And this is a great example of how that power served the interest of this elite white CEO, where all these resources were like poured into. So it's either to protect the white man or it's to oppress the Black and brown people, as we've seen with college campuses and protesters, who are anti-genocide, where the police are unleashed on them in violent ways. So, I mean, this documentary is really, really good. And even though, of course, like, you know, one of the reasons why I love the documentary so much, and I keep saying this to people, is that, you know, we really need to go back to this like grounded solidarity approach, where we realize that all oppressions are linked together, right? So the Black struggle for freedom and the oppression of Black people in America and other parts of the world, Western world, are linked to the struggle for freedom for Palestinians and those who are anti-genocide.
That's very well said, and that's why it's always hilarious when I see the Zionist ops always try to drive a wedge between Black Americans and Palestinians. I see it all the time. There's always those anime profiles, dog profiles, the Zionist bots. They will reply to my tweets like, "Don't you know that if you was in Gaza, they will call you the N word?" They would. I'm like, I've never seen any group of people unequivocally that show more solidarity with the Black cause than Palestinians and their supporters. Period. I have done reporting on the ground, and I posted an interview I did with one of the Kansas City Free Gaza organization. They explained like, yeah, we support reparations, we support all the acts of the Black radical movement. They've been the one who showed the most solidarity with us. Meanwhile, there's a viral video. I didn't want to show it on YouTube. There's a viral video of some settler colonialists. He's spitting in the face of this Black kid as he calls him the N-word. And I just saw that on my timeline today. The contrast is so poignant. And something else that you said that's important. Go ahead if you want to chime in. Go ahead.
I was just going to say that, you know, it's so interesting because this concept of identity politics, right, where someone's identity, like racialized identity, is almost like kind of put to the forefront to explain things or to promote things. And you'd think that identity politics would work in the favor of racialized people, right, where we are, you know, where our identity, this like collective solidarity would come from that identity politics. The truth is it works against us, right? And we saw that with Kamala Harris. And I was going to say, you know, it's so funny. Colonizers have always done this, separating of communities and divide and rule and conquer type of, that's been their goal. And we've seen it time and again, even in the last year and a half. And I was going to say to you, it's so funny. There have been 3 times on my social media. I'm quite active. I'm quite vocal on most topics, you know, most kind of like political topics, but 3 times where I've been attacked. And it's interesting because it's all intercultural, intercommunity stuff, right? So one of the times I was attacked was when I didn't support Kamala Harris. So it was like this attack. And the same thing happened with you. I know it happened with you because I saw the comments that you would get, right?
I'm a sexist misogynist. Don't you know, Dr. Sabrina? I'm surprised you joined me because according to Kamala supporters, I'm the most vicious sexist there is, even though I voted for the Jewish woman.
And they weaponize this term misogynoir, right? Like all of a sudden it became like the most popular term over a few months, where, you know, it's a real problem, but the way that it was used and weaponized, disgusting. The other time that I was attacked viciously was when I talked about white feminism. And it was around the time where that young girl or that lady in Iran, you know, that she was filmed in her underwear, walking around. And of course, the white feminists and, you know, they just kind of like use that as a moment to be like, oh my God, look at this oppressive, backward regime. And look at this brave woman. It turned out that she had mental health issues. Her own family came out. Her husband, her parents had come out and requested for the picture not to be shared, and the video not to be shared, but it was completely weaponized. Now, I don't like to talk on behalf of communities. Like I remember when, you know, George Floyd had been killed and like the Black Lives Matter movement was happening. One of the key things I have learned from my advocacy is to never talk over the people who are being impacted in that moment. Don't talk over Black people when it's, you know, the Black struggle is the topic at the time. Don't talk over Iranians. Don't talk over Syrians, right? So I try my best not to speak on behalf of a community that I'm not a part of, that I'm not, you know, on the receiving end of the whatever they're going through, right? However, it was very important at the time for me to comment on white feminism and the dangers of it and how it's used by imperial powers to kind of push this agenda. And the agenda is that this is a barbaric nation. We need to free these oppressed women, right? So that was the thing. And oh my man, I was viciously attacked by people who were pro-Palestine, who were like, and they'd always say that to me. They'd be like, so much for me supporting Palestine. I'm not going to do that anymore. All of a sudden, they weren't interested in Palestine because I made a comment about white feminism. So these white women were offended, and and Iranians were offended, right? The obviously the Shah Iranians. And now recently I've shared a few videos. I've actually not made any public comments of my own, but I've shared videos to dispel myths about what's happening in Syria. And my main goal, like you, Nick, I've seen, is to remind people that the same mainstream media that's been pushing an agenda, like, how can you support that, the narrative of that mainstream media when it comes to this topic, right? Like, be wary, be aware, ask questions, question what's happening, right? Like, if we know that Zionists are liars, the US has a stake in what's happening in the Middle East, then be a bit critical in your thinking. And that has caused a crazy amount of backlash, right? You get called a pro-Assadist, someone who's denying the atrocities. So the point I'm making with all of this is this has happened, historically in every movement, but this kind of interculture, intercommunal, interracial, intra-racial tension, it's designed to be that way.
People don't realize that the massive solidarity that is seen on the United States left on Palestine is extremely unique. It's extremely unique, meaning that there are, and we did many streams displaying this, that there's a very large segment of the United States left that is filled with privileged academic suburbanites who are more attached to the empire. Now, these people, because the Zionist entity is so barbaric, they speak out against Palestine. These are social democrat-like types. They stand for Palestine, but they believe the empire regarding anything else. These are the same people who was advocating funding Ukraine. I promise you, those are the same people who was upset with you. The same people who advocated funding the Ukraine war. We talk, and if you want to know who I'm talking about, I'll give you a name. Mehdi Hassan. Imagine the Mehdi Hassan archetype. Mehdi Hassan he has Assad derangement syndrome. He wants nothing more than the United States to overthrow Assad in Syria. He also is a strong supporter of the Zelensky Banderite regime, strong supporter of the Ukraine war, but he speaks out on Palestine because it's an obvious issue. So I think there's been a lot of people who misunderstood the lines of solidarity that actually exist because of Palestine, because the genocide in Gaza was so easy to get correct. So whenever you actually tell the truth, especially about stuff like white feminism, you get the same treatment that I have gotten for the last 5 years: complete cancelization and blacklisting by the professional managerial class. Because I explain how white feminism is a plague. It's a scourge of humanity that has been used to justify. I'll pass right to you, but they used to justify the murder of Black and brown people, Black men, Palestinian men. They use it to justify our murder and falsely accuse us of rape while being silent on the issues of Black and brown women. And I'm tired of being quiet about it. But now, Dr. Sabrina, I know you want to chime in, so go ahead.
I was just going to say that, I wrote a tweet recently about how you can't talk about race without talking about the intersection of class. And this is a perfect example, right? Because you've got the elite Muslims, the elite Arabs, the elite Black people with their proximity to power, their proximity to whiteness that affords them privileges and access, right? Like, that's what they don't want to give up on. And that's what makes them buy into the narrative. Because if you don't buy into the narrative and promote the narrative, you don't get a seat at the table, right? And even though the seat at the table doesn't mean that your people are getting freed, it just means that you personally have a seat at this table for a certain amount of time for your personal benefit. And, that's where like revolutionary types are so different, right? Like the rebels, the revolutionaries, because they don't care to have a seat at the table if it means their people are in the ditches and in the prisons and on the streets, right? Being impacted by all the struggles, the class struggle, the race struggle, right? The gender struggle, all of it. And that's why, you know, some of the people you mentioned, and there are many others who you will find strangely commenting on things that seem to be such a, you know, departing from truth and justice. The thing, like they'll jump bandwagons constantly, where they'll be pro-Palestine, but then they'll, you know, say all this shit that doesn't make sense. And I'm saying I'm actually genuinely baffled by my X feed at the moment, because I will see these people who for the last 1 year have been like, smash the system, you know, this and that. And now all of a sudden they're like rejoicing at the idea of colonial imperial powers taking down or getting involved in the Middle East, right? Like the truth is that Gaddafi could have been a terrible human being. Saddam Hussein could have been a terrible may well have been a terrible human being. Same as Assad. This is not a commentary on whether these people are good, bad, moral, have committed crimes, not committed crimes. My commentary is simply that we shouldn't be allowing Western powers who have a stake in the game, right, to be getting involved, because we know what that involvement does. We know that involvement in Iraq and Afghanistan and all these places where they wanted to free our people and bring liberation to these places, that these places were pillaged and looted. And, you know, that's what baffles me, is that I've got so many people who are celebrating this moment without having the foresight based on history to see what this means for that region.
Yeah, that's very well said. And now I have to pick your brain on it now. This is already a very fun conversation. I'm glad that we had you back, because there are a lot of people, and if anyone uses this term, you immediately discard them. There are people who legitimately believe in humanitarian interventions. Like, they will never say it like that, but they believe in humanitarian interventions. If you're rooting for the Syrian terrorists, it don't matter if you admit it or not, you support humanitarian interventions, because that is the CIA who propped them up. There's American vehicles, CIA weapons. CIA and the Mossad has been deeply entrenched in Syria. That's why, as an anti-imperialist, this is what a lot of people don't understand, because they don't read theory, they don't read history, they don't really understand their ideology. They just say stuff like, I'm anti-war, but they're not anti-imperialist. I'm anti-imperialist. Not only do I oppose intervention into the country, I will inherently always oppose your movement if you decide to sell out your people by joining powers with the dominant hegemon. Which is why, and I had Korea rant yesterday. And I'm gonna do. A lot of people ask me to do the Korea Power Hour, and I will explain to you guys the correct position on Korea, because South Korea, their ancestors are full of traitors. No matter if you agree with communism or capitalism or not. And this is just an example of what I mean. Just a quick example, right? So even if you're an anti-communist, yuck. But let's say you are, and there were a lot of people in South Korea who was. There were a lot of people in the South Korean army when they was losing, who they was executed by their government, because even though they was against the communists in the North, they was opposed to South Korea joining forces with the United States in order to oppose the North. So similar situation in Syria. Even if you hate Assad, even if I was opposed to Assad, and I'm neutral because I'm not a citizen of that government, but if I was even opposed to Assad, I would inherently side with Assad, because he's fighting traitors. People who took the side of a Western power against the will of his own people, the same as Juan Guaido in the opposition in Venezuela. That's my position unapologetically. I will unapologetically oppose any force that betrays their people and robs the sovereignty of the will of their people. Anything else you want to say, Dr.? I actually would love to get your thoughts, because so many people been getting the issue of Syria wrong, and now I definitely got to pick your brain on it. So, what do you think?
Once again, I can't speak about Syria as, you know, like the lived experience of a Syrian person, because I'm not Syrian, but what I can tell you is that we've seen this happen time and again, and we should just look to history to understand what's happening, right? Like, and this idea of a white savior, right? This comes from internalized colonialism. And we see it all the time. We actually see it. Internalized racism and internalized colonialism makes a person who's racialized, Black, brown, whether you're living in Syria, whether you're living in Afghanistan, it makes you think that white people truly are better, more powerful, more moral, right? Morally superior, racially superior. And they seek the help of the white, powerful elites in order to save them. And this is a problem that's an intercommunity problem. And that's why I speak about it so much. You know, I always say to people that the first step of liberating a nation or liberating, you know, our people on land is us liberating our minds from the oppression of white supremacy. Because white supremacy has us believe, the other thing is it has us believe that we should accept crumbs, which is what was happening with Kamala Harris and the Democrats. You know, that was internalized white supremacy, telling a lot of Black people that this crumb that's being thrown your way, you need to take it, right? You should take this, as though you don't deserve any better, as though perfection and freedom and justice and a life of dignity is not something that everyone deserves. Like, why should I not want complete dignity in living? Why partial dignity?
Very well said. And you notice how they wasn't giving Indian men smoke. Indian men still haven't got any smoke at all for Kamala Lucy.
Yeah, I mean, her Black identity was very much put at the forefront, right? But I think that was also because she was weaponizing her Black identity quite a lot. Like, I kept seeing her like go in and out of like Blackness, and it's very common to code switch, right? Like, it happens to all of us when we speak multiple languages or belong to multiple cultures or, you know, kind of racial ethnic groups, that we code switch between communities. But her code switching seemed very targeted, right? Where she was really kind of weaponizing her Black identity to appeal to Black people as though I am your savior and I'm going to save you.
Absolutely. Very well said. And there's a lot of these like disgusting liberal pundits and academics who were trying to justify what Kamala was doing. They were like, well, technically, when you're a woman climbing the corporate ladder, you got to change the. No, what she is doing is old school pondering. Like, she see Black people and she start talking. It's old school, disgusting pondering. You're not going to use any like smarty pants bullshit academic terms to justify that to me. And that's exactly what they have done. These same academics, and then there's something else I got to pick your brain on, because you mentioned something interesting quite a while ago that I want to get back to, because I remember seeing you pop off during the time where the Iranian woman was having the mental health crisis. And just like you said, you try not to speak for a community. That was a very, and the issue of Iranian woman is very hard for me to talk about as a man. But I always try to stay principled that I don't comment on what happened in other people's countries. It's not my position to, but it's definitely something that was hard to talk on. But to see Europeans in white dominated society, they value the most out of Muslim women getting naked. And I believe that you and many others are saying that. I want you to speak more on that. What is up with the Western obsession with Arab women taking their clothes off? I would love to hear you speak on that.
Because there's been this like false equivalence made with freedom and you know and being immodest. Like, there's no other word to really describe it, right? So modesty is equated with oppression. So if anybody wants to cover up, wear a hijab, or even wear clothes, and I'm talking about, as I'm a Muslim woman, South Asian, West Asian background, and I don't wear hijab, but I don't feel comfortable in a bikini. I just don't. It's just not something that I would want to wear. So I have always had a problem with going to pools or beaches where I want to wear a little more clothes than a bikini or a swimsuit. And I'm always looked at and spoken to in a way that I'm lesser than. I'm a lesser woman, that, I have lesser freedom because I don't want to wear a bikini or I don't want to wear a swimsuit. And the interesting thing is, it's not just Muslim women who don't want to show their bodies all the time. There are women from all walks of life who don't necessarily want to take their clothes off. But there's this equivalence made with like progress, freedom, democracy, liberation. It's all connected to a woman dressing a certain way. And that's why I said that there's no one else more obsessed than a white feminist about, an Arab Muslim woman taking her clothes off. And in that situation, it was an Iranian woman who was walking around for whatever reason, which we did not know, because she did not make a statement. She didn't go out there saying freedom for Iranian women. She didn't say any. There was literally, it was all projection. They projected this idea that she was doing it as a protest. It was turned into, it was almost like it was fabricated and propagandized as a freedom movement when she may not have been doing it for that reason. So, the point that I was just trying to make here is that, there's this like equivalence made with, again, like all things white are right. Anything that goes against that is just automatically backwards. It's automatically inferior. Right. And that's why when you have elements of that elite whiteness, it gives you privilege. And I talk about this all the time, about how my British accent allows me access and privilege in ways that it wouldn't if I had an accent from Afghanistan or an accent from Pakistan. That's just a fact. The fact that I'm aware of that, I'm very self-reflective of that. And I, in the last year and a half, this one comment that I get a lot, from people who are like very disturbed by the images that are coming out, right, from the multiple genocides we're witnessing. They'll often say things like, how do I move on, or how do I go on in life witnessing all of this? Like, my children are safe. I'm living this comfortable life. Like, I feel so guilty. Like, I feel so terrible living this life as I'm witnessing people having everything taken from them. And I always say the same thing to them, that we've all been given different privileges, right? Our access to power is on a scale. Like, so some have more access to power, some have less, whether it comes from education, whether it comes from the job, whether it comes from your accent, the color of your skin, the clothes you wear. There are so many things that give you access to power and privilege. The point here is, what do you do with that privilege? Because you could take that privilege, like some of the names you listed, and you can regurgitate those same white supremacist, colonial, imperial talking points, or you could take that privilege, something that I said in a tweet not long ago, and use them as tools to free the rest of your people. And that's what I do. I take the privileges, I take all the things that I've been granted and given, and that's my way of surviving right now. That's my way of saying, you know what? God has given me all of this. God has given me, the access, the safety. But what I do with that is what will determine. That's how I'm connected to people in other parts of the world. That's how I'm connected to their struggle for freedom.
Yeah, absolutely. That's what, if you are in a privileged position, that is why we need class traders. We need people in those positions to be supportive of all causes. I think that's what we're talking about in terms of using that. And I think that everyone has their role. Everyone, and I've been put in this very weird role where I'm like, I give speeches randomly and I live stream and enthuse the working class. We all got to find our thing, whether it's
because you're a likable, endearing person, Nick. That's why. That's the thing that you've given. Like in England, we say, gifted the gab, right? So like some people, they've just been given the gift of gab or charisma, or they have the type of personality that people are drawn to them. And that too is a privilege, right? and you're using it.
Yeah, I'm trying. You guys know I'm not good at taking compliments.
I can tell because you're blushing.
But I appreciate it. This is definitely a very enjoyable conversation. Always great to have you on and sharing your expertise. Especially, I want to pivot to this questionnaire because once again, I'm not good at taking compliments, so I'm pivot. I definitely appreciate it. Make sure you guys follow Dr. Sabrina. I got her handle in the description. I'll invite her on because once again, banger after banger tweets. Always great to hear. It one of the tweets. I told you guys, there are a few accounts because the X timeline is so shitty. Like there's certain accounts I'll make sure I follow, and Dr. Sabrina is definitely one of them. I want to get your thoughts on this because as we have a little bit of time here. So this is like the big incoming fascism that a lot of people don't even see coming yet. And to be clear, we still have a lot of this implemented Zionist fascism right now. But what Chuck Schumer and Mike Johnson is talking about right now is next level Zionist censorship because we're seeing Israel lose public favor from demographics I never saw coming. Israel was always unpopular, especially young blacks, Muslims, you know what I mean? I am seeing suburbanites. I am seeing polls where like white people are like opposing to Israel. And it's something that's panicking the ruling class to the point where they say, fuck it, man, we can't even pretend to have this illusion of free speech anymore. We're going to straight up have a bill where we're going to crack down on anyone who's critical of Israel. And don't be fooled by the headline. And I think this headline is funny because they say Chuck Schumer and Mike Johnson in a standoff. Do you guys know what the standoff is? You want to know what the big disagreement between the two parties on whether they should censor Americans or not? Chuck Schumer, he believes that if we censor Americans, we should go through the Senate to do so. Mike Johnson believes we should put in the National Defense Authorization. I'm sorry, I had it twisted. Mike Johnson wants to go through the Senate. Chuck Schumer wants to put in the National Defense Authorization Act. That's the best you're going to get in terms of the difference, though. I want to pass it to you, Dr. Sabrina, very broadly. I want your thoughts on this crackdown. Someone who lived through this. I mean, we all lived through this. If you lived through the West, the UK is it's a fascist state. Germany is a straight up fascist state, especially when it comes to this issue. So, Dr. Sabrina, I want to pass it to you. What's your thoughts on this anti-Semitism bill?
Well, obviously, this is ridiculous, right? Because we've got the conflation of anti-Semitism and anti-Zionism happening. And this has been like the main propaganda, like the key propaganda that's being pushed all over the West. It's interesting that you mentioned this because I shared a tweet today of a survey that was done in Canada with Ontario doctors. So just imagine like all New York Jewish doctors were surveyed, or a whole bunch of them were surveyed. We don't even know how many. You're fast. And
I'm always in the lab cooking.
Yeah, see, and they claimed that 80% of Jewish doctors want to leave medicine because of the rampant anti-Semitism, not stating or not clarifying that what they mean by anti-Semitism is anti-Zionism. So and the people who are being interviewed aren't Jewish people per se, they're Zionists, right? So this conflation of a political ideology and a religious identity, that's a lot of it is self-identified, right? So it's self-conflation that people are doing where they are. And it's so interesting because I've met a lot of Zionists, okay, because of some of the work that I've been doing or that I had done years ago. The interesting thing is most ardent Zionists are not practicing Jews. They actually don't celebrate any Jewish holidays, or they'll very openly say, I'm not a religious, I'm actually an atheist. I'm actually agnostic, but I'm a Jew. And it's like they have racialized a religious identity, and then they stick to that racialized identity as the main core of their, their identity. And then they claim that when it comes to things like this, right? And that becomes a weapon to silence people and suppress people. So, I wrote a tweet about this and I said that, if you rewrite this and if you say rise of anti-Zionism in medicine in Ontario, a recent survey of Zionist medical professionals found more than 80% of respondents across Ontario have faced anti-Zionism at work since October. It would make sense because that's actually what's happening. This conflation is like really confusing people. And the worst thing is, it's not confusing people like you and me. It's confusing that apathetic middle, the ones who don't really want to do the work of finding out the difference, or, they claim ignorance. They are still claiming ignorance, and they don't want to be accused of anti-Semitism. So they're just steering clear of any criticism of Israel. So it's very dangerous, this anti-Semitism bill, because this constant conflation is going to lead to basically complete, like freedom of speech is going to be gone out the window, right? And then the other question we should ask is, why is there not an anti-Islamophobia bill then, right? Where criticism of countries that are majority Muslim will also fall under that bill. Like, if we were to do that, if we were to actually make this not an anti-Semitism bill, but like an anti-discrimination against faith bill, then all of a sudden there'll be a big freaking mess, right? We'll have a big, huge shit pile, and you wouldn't be able to like separate any of these issues. We did have a window like in Canada where with universities in Canada, the IHRA definition was not passed for universities. It was a big win for Canada. Our body. Sorry?
Yeah, I was surprised when that happened, but go ahead.
Absolutely. I mean, it is very surprising, but it's all these little wins. And the same thing happened with our Toronto District School Board, which is like one of our biggest school boards in Canada, right? Where they haven't accepted the IHRA definition, which would say that criticism of Israel and Zionism is anti-Semitism. So, we do have to push back on this. But what I always say to people is that we need to push back all the time when it's done in incendiary ways. Like, for example, when this survey was released, I thought that it was very important for me to contextualize these results so that people can think about it. Oh, yeah, of course, like this isn't anti-Semitism. We need to constantly be doing that to disrupt, because the propaganda machine is working very hard, especially after the Amnesty International report that you asked me about when we first started. But because of that report, which is late, but still important and powerful, and we know it's important and powerful because of the backlash that it's getting. So because of all these reports that are coming out, it's, they're very worried, and the propaganda machine is going harder, right? So we need to push back on these narratives.
Yeah, the ICC is anti-Semitic. Amnesty International is anti-Semitic. They need to
United Nations
anti-Semitic. At this point, they need like
the Pope. The Pope is
the Pope too. The Pope anti-Semitic. At this point, they need to give us a list of what's not anti-Semitic. At this point, I'm anti-Semitic. The ADL. We officially anti-Semites according to them. Fucking everyone is anti-Semitic. At what point do we just start laughing in these people's face? I've been at this point. I think, especially now, I think the age of us fucking being easy on this issue should be over. Like, I don't even like, and feel free to push back on me if you want, or anyone can push back on me. I don't even like when people do this shit where they're like, well, Nick, technically, don't you know there really is some anti-Semitism for real? There actually is some people who hate. Shut up. No, the fuck. There's no one who is serious that is going around like, oh my God, I hate the Jews. It doesn't exist.
Not in my world.
Yeah, never. And I'm done like even validating it. Like, I'm not even doing this thing. Well, there are some, no. When we hit the point where we are right now, where the government is literally cracking down and about to implement fascism based on the anti-Semitism hoax, the day where we fucking give them an inch on this issue is over. We look at them straight in their face and say anti-Semitism, and I've been canceled so many times. The ADL canceled me. We've been throttled on YouTube because of this. Because I will look at Zionists right in the eye, and I will tell them anti-Semitism isn't real. The only one that's real is one against the Palestinians.
So,
Go
you
ahead.
know, the other reason why what you're saying is really important, and I spoke earlier, right, about this whole idea of you can't talk about race without the intersection of class. You can't talk. When it comes to what you're saying in terms of like anti-Semitism, right, we can't forget that Jewish people have actually become racialized as white over time. They are white people, right? So they may be Jewish in practice of faith, but in terms of how they appear, how they move around in the world, they are white. And anyone who passes as white has the privilege, has white privilege. So to then claim to be the most oppressed group when you're not physically, like, people cannot identify you unless you say something. And the truth is, yes, you know, anti-Semitism in terms of people who hate Jews exists, but it impacts Black people, Muslims. Like, the people who hate Jews actually hate all of us as well, right? So we're on the same team here when it comes to like Jewish people. The problem here is that Zionists, in my opinion, are the most anti-Semitic group that exists.
Yep.
Zionists are the reason why Jewish people are going to suffer in terms of like anti-Semitism or being hated, because they purposely conflate the faith and the political ideology. And if you're going to do that, that's going to happen. And that's why, you know, years ago when this whole ISIS thing was happening, it was very important for Muslims to disassociate themselves from ISIS and say that that group doesn't represent us. They're not Muslims. They're not. This is a distortion. This is like a, you know, bastardization of my faith and Islam. They don't represent us. Because at the end of the day, if ISIS keeps going around beheading people and claiming, you know, like and committing violence in the name of Islam, then yes, Islamophobia is going to increase. But then it was important for us to disassociate, right? Which is what Jewish people have to do. They have to disassociate themselves from the violence of Zionism and the atrocities of the Israeli, you know, of Israel. And I'm going to say this because I feel like I say it all the time, but because I don't get much backlash on it, it means I'm not saying it enough. That every single Israeli is actually complicit in the genocide. Every single Israeli, by way of your presence on
Now you
that
speak my
land,
language.
by
You
way of
definitely
your
speak my
presence,
language.
being a
Yeah.
settler means that you are complicit in the genocide of Palestinians. So when I say there are no innocent Israelis, that's what I mean. You're not innocent. Just like in Nazi Germany, there were no innocent Nazis. They weren't. There was no one who was innocent. You were somehow complicit. Even in your silence, you were complicit. By way of being in that community, you were complicit. So yeah, I'm saying it loud and clear.
It's even worse for Israel, and I believe. It's even worse for Israel, I believe, because at least there were some helpless Germans who couldn't do anything about the government. You understand that every Israeli is a settler. They're settlers. They steal Palestinian. So when a Palestinian is kicked out of their home and an Israeli settler move into that home, you cannot tell me that's an innocent person at that point. I will add this, and I hope you agree with me. I would say that the only innocent Israelis that exist are the children, because I don't think children can consent to being a member of an apartheid regime.
Absolutely, yeah,
100%. And that makes the Israeli parents even more deplorable, because they're using their children as human shields.
Absolutely, and let's go a step further. The children are actually victims, right? You can almost as though, like, you know, people who are kept in the basement chained up. That's what I equate like Israeli children. Like, they're being brainwashed, they're being kept in a place that they might not necessarily want to be, like the core of their being might not want to be there or believe in that, but they're being held against their will, right? So they are not only innocent, but they're victims. Children are always victims. And this is something I've always made clear, right? So I absolutely agree with you on that one. But I was going to add to this and say, just so that people can understand, because I love to like connect oppressions so that people can really understand. You know, I've said this before as well. Unless you are a anti-racist, you too benefit from racism. You too are complicit in the oppression of Black people in America. It's not enough to not be killing Black people. Like, it's not enough to say, I didn't shoot him, or I didn't, oppress this Black family or this Black. I'm not the one who didn't give the rental property to this Black family. I'm not the one who denied care to this Black pregnant woman. The fact that you do not speak up or you're not anti-racist, it makes you complicit in the harms of white supremacy, in the oppression of white supremacy.
Yep. See, I told y'all. I told all the Black liberals, there's no one more down for the cause other than us, than our brothers and sisters in the pro-Palestine movement, the anti-imperialists. There's no one more down for the cause. We have to drag our white allies to cross the finish line. That you guys see Dr. Sabrina is already at, spitting straight fire. Look, I talk about, because I mentioned this is something that pissed a lot of people off before, because when you look at the people who are attached to Zionism, the RFK Jr., people are like, why is RFK Jr., why is he so good on Ukraine? Why is he so good at calling out the war, but he attached to Israel? It's because he's a white boy.
Of course.
You have people who are attached to colonial, and this pisses people off when we say it, but you made this point earlier. There are these white people who are attached to colonialism. So if they see Israel lose, they will see colonialism lose. All of a sudden, the legitimacy of their lineage is in question, because their lineage is based on colonialism and slavery. So they need Israel to win as a moral victory. And if anyone want to question what you said when you said Israelis and modern Zionist Jews are white people, what Zionists will tell you with a straight face is these people are indigenous of Palestine. Look at these people. This is exactly what he was talking about. The indigenous Middle Eastern right here. Anyway, Dr. Sabrina, I won't pass it for pass you any last words. We definitely gotta do this again. We're over an hour. I don't want to keep you any. I don't want to keep you that much.
Oh
longer.
no, I'm good. You caught me on a good day. You caught me on a good Friday Jummah day. So like I had a bit of less work, so I was happy to join you. And I always love chatting with you anyway, Nick. Our kind of ideas align quite a lot when it comes to this. I was gonna say, with regards to why the Palestinian struggle, the Black liberation struggle, it's so tied together. And the reason why you find, people like I think the first kind of group that I aligned myself with, I was growing up in England, and of course the history that I got was very British history. So, the Holocaust was taught to me. And I remember I really aligned with the Jewish struggle at the time. So I was very I wanted to fight anti-Semitism, and I wanted to make sure that something like that never happens. And I saw myself in Jewish people. And I remember in school, there was a girl, and I heard that she was Jewish, and I went up to her and I wanted to be friends with her. I'm 11 years old, okay? And she was just I didn't realize the difference between Zionist or Israeli and, Jewish at the time. And she kind of completely disassociated from me. And I remember at the time saying, oh, you eat kosher food and I eat halal food, so we can be friends because we can eat each other's food.
Yeah, we try, man. We try our best. And when we're young and innocent, we really do try.
I really, really connected to that struggle, because it was a race struggle, right? Like the same people who hated Jews for that, when that was happening, when the Holocaust was happening, hated Muslim, hated brown people. And then after that, I remember it was just all in with the Black struggle, right? With Black Lives Matter, and making sure that, we are not just against racism and not racist, but that we're anti-racist. So, I saw myself with that struggle. And I remember in school, again, aligning myself with Black friends. I used to always make Black friends. And, because I felt like it's the same, the way that, and I saw it in my school, and this is how early it starts, right? The anti-Black racism, the anti-Palestinian, anti-Muslim racism that you see in schools. The same people who were telling me as a brown Muslim girl that I'm not going to get anywhere in life, and streaming me into the lower level classes, convincing me that I shouldn't do medicine or I shouldn't do any of this higher education stuff, were the same people who were streaming my Black friends into sports and not anything that we were all placed in the same lower level math classes, lower level English classes. So I saw that struggle. It was the same struggle, right? So we will align ourselves. And the reason why white people align themselves with Zionists, it's like it speaks for itself. The reason why white people align with Zionists is because Zionists are white. They are white. This is a white supremacist movement. It doesn't matter how much they try to claim indigeneity to that land and that they are racialized by way of their religious identity, which they don't even practice. They present as white, pass as white, and they have white privilege, which is why you have people like Shai Davidai who switches whenever it's his mood, right? Like someday he's he's a white man, and some days he's not a white man. A black man can't do that. A brown man cannot call himself white one day because he's in the mood, like dipping in and out of race. That I have only seen that with Zionists.
Absolutely. It's always based on their convenience. You absolutely cooked as always. And I think that, and there are a lot of people in denial over that, but these are the same people confused about why RFK Jr. has the position he does. Like, it's when you hear him talk about other wars, it's inconceivable that he will be a Zionist. That's why people are shocked. Like when you hear him speak about Ukraine, when you hear him speaking about interventions as a whole, you would think like, man, of course you would get Palestine right. Nope. Completely, he like Palestinians are the most pampered people in the world. He becomes a fucking maniac because their identity is that attached to colonialism. But anyway, we gotta do this again much sooner. Anything else you want to say?
Can I just answer one really important question that came up in the comments, and I think you should answer this too.
I can pull it up. If
so
you know
somebody said, why do Black people align themselves with Zionists? Right? And
capital does. I will say this: capital, for the most part, does. Now, tokenism is what white people use in order to cope. People say, well, you blame white people, but aren't there Black Zionists? If you're in a white supremacist power structure, how do you climb the ladder? By mimicking white power. You got to take the positions of white power. You're not going to be a radical abolitionist and be a fucking CEO. You're not going to be on CNN. Yeah. You're not going to get no. So you have to imitate whiteness in their positions. And if you want to drive the capitalist ladder, you have to concede to Zionism. A lot of these Black capitalists, a lot of these Black Congressional Caucus people, do you think they're really fucking passionate about who controls Jerusalem? They don't give a fuck. They're going to follow wherever the money goes. And it's always weird that they always use that as an excuse. But go ahead, Dr.
Absolutely. And then just, to add to that, because I always like to look at these things with an empathetic lens, right? Like the reason why Black people or brown people, racialized Muslim people, would even want to align themselves with power or with Zionists because of that capital, the ladder, is because there has been such generational struggle, right? Intergenerational oppression and struggle. That can we blame a community for feeling like the only way out of that torment, right, is by aligning yourself? Like, I don't blame. The thing is, I don't blame these people. It's a form of internalized colonialism and internalized racism and internalized white supremacy. But it's because there's been so many generations of exploitation and oppression that our communities have faced that it's hard to be an abolitionist or a revolutionary. You don't make money. You're poor as fuck. Okay. Like you, right? Like your life is constantly in danger. My husband thinks that I'm going to get executed every day that I leave the house. So it's not easy. It's obviously a very difficult position to take. It's easier to align yourself with Zionists. But the one thing I think that makes people like us do the work we do is that our moral conscience is maybe like the tuning is a little bit different to others. Like we place morality and justice above our own safety and our own progress and our own successes. And that is something that isn't always there, but that's why people like you, right, Nick, are really, really important because you inspire others. You inspire people to look at you and say, hey, being a revolutionary is actually like cool, like he's okay. Like the Zionists really want people to think that they have supreme power. Like I was just doxxed on this massive Instagram page, okay? They wrote this like 10-page freaking post on me to dox me and it was like shared on hundreds of thousands of follower pages. Okay, so I've been getting nonstop for a few days. I've been getting nonstop hate, violent messages, and all of that. But the one common kind of thread amongst all of it, the thing that they keep saying is like, "You're done. You're cooked. You're exposed." That say bye-bye to your career, say bye to any job, you're done. Like there's this like expression of some sort of ultimate power, like this deranged power that they think that they have power over us. And I'm reading these comments thinking, you fucking idiot. Like, no, that's not what's happening. I'm fine, you know? And I think you and I being fine, speaking up, living our lives the way we are is actually a form of resistance as well. This is resistance, showing people that they don't have the power that they claim they do, because that intimidation is a massively, you know, it's like it's an effective method to silence people and make them become, you know, like the black brown people who align with Zionists.
Yeah, and that was beautifully said. And there's no other way for me. Like I don't understand people who, I don't even understand sellouts to their core. You know what I mean? Like, how can you even be happy by selling out and allow yourself to be silent? So I'm glad I'm able to provide a model for people to not be silent, to break away from their fear of being judged by the mainstream. It was something I never had. Once I realized that Obama was a criminal, I was the black guy that was speaking out against Obama. You know what I mean? That's how much I didn't give a fuck. Like if I feel like I was right, I'd rather be the odd one out instead of being part of a fraudulent society. You know what I mean?
Did you believe in Obama when he was first elected?
When I was 16, I didn't technically vote for Obama in 2008 because I was like 17. But everyone was on the hype train. Everyone was on the hype train.
I have to admit, I was on the hype train. I was so happy when he was elected. I thought, wow, this is it. This is our savior. You know,
I was extremely anti-war. Like I grew up during the Iraq War era. So I was supportive of Barack Obama. Obviously, like him being black was a big deal too. But it was more than anything, it was like, oh, this dude about end the wars. And the reason why I was attracted to a black president, because then I was thinking like, man, we have a black president, this motherfucker gonna be different. Then that's like how I used to think back then, back when I was a young liberal, like, oh, he's black, of course he's gonna be better than a white. But then once I learned that wasn't the case, I'm like, okay, I'm abandoning that idea because that's how you know, young and dumb. That's what liberalism convinces you that, oh, we elect a black person, they must be better. And then like 2014 Gaza, learning about the drone strikes. That's what I was like. I'm done.
That radicalized me. 2014.
Yeah,
it was the exact same time.
Yeah, ever since my time as a citizen journalist about 5 years ago, I've been covering Israel. I was like, people thought I was crazy. Like a year, I remember I interviewed Marianne Williamson. People were like, I grilled her over her saying that she believed that Israel has the right to defend themselves. And people used to think like, man, Nick, you're being such a hard ass on Marianne Williamson. Who cares? She believes that Israel has the right to defend itself. Now on the left, that's hairstyle. You never say that. And now she walks back and she claims she never said it. You know what I mean? But it always was an issue close to my heart because of what I saw what Obama did, where he enabled and doubled down on the police state.
And what makes it worse is that he was very well versed on Palestine. Like he was learned. He wasn't like some sort of like, you know, hick white, you know, Texas, you know, who's never heard of Palestine or is confused about the history. He was friends with Edward Said, and like he sat in rooms with these people and he like, you know, expressed himself in all the language that we use today, right? Like he bought into all of that. So this flip, like you can't claim ignorance when you're not ignorant on a topic, like you're educated on that topic. So if ignorance isn't something you can claim, then what's left? Evil, right? Like,
I'm not liberal, and I may be wrong on this. I'm not sure, but I actually, especially as a Marxist, I believe in personal accountability in some sense. You know what I mean? I think the ruling class had a stranglehold. And they really had us fucked for the majority. I'm talking about like 99.99% of human history. You realize the ruling class had us in a stranglehold. I would say even as early as like the late 90s, early 2000s, the access of information was so hard to find. I think in the modern era, I think a lot of people are just fucking cowards, man. I think they just tune out. I think they know the truth and they just don't want to struggle. Everyone know what's going on. Like the amount of access of information that we have now in 2020 and 2024, there are people who are making these decisions to side with the ruling class, and I would never personally understand that. One thing I will say before, and I'll pass you for last thoughts before we really will wrap up. I'm actually babysitting my niece, so today, so we're gonna head out here soon. But one thing I'll say, do you guys know the ADL and Zionist organizations, they viewed Black Americans as the biggest threat to Zionism? Yeah, Jonathan Greenblatt, yeah, all these people who viewed Black Americans the biggest threat. We reported on this on RBN. Opinion polls show over and over again, when you look at the demographics who oppose Zionism the most outside of Arab Americans, is Black Americans, especially young Black Americans.
It makes so much sense. It makes sense.
I can show you the article. I can find. I don't have it saved, but I'm sure I can find it because I reported on it before. How the ADL, they spied on multiple Black activists. Let me look up.
Well, it makes complete sense because the Black struggle and the Palestinian struggle, is the same. Like, it's the same struggle against white supremacy and colonialism and imperialism. And, I always say that, our fight for social justice, our fight for justice, like as Muslims, as brown people, as Arabs, it actually rests on the shoulders of like pioneer Black activists, like social justice warriors who paved the way for us. So, and the struggles are so aligned and the people are so aligned that solidarity scares the shit out of them. The solidarity between Black people.
Yeah, I think this is one of the articles. I don't know if this is exactly it, but I report on this before. I just want to show you more than anything. But the Israel lobby sees Black Lives Matter as a major strategic threat. And then there's another article I can't necessarily find, but I reported on before on how the ADL and other Zionist organizations, they will literally spy on Black activists. They definitely spy on RBN. They're definitely keeping tabs on us, which is why ADL put that post about me saying that Revolutionary Black House is an anti-Semitic network.
Go
ahead.
You know that Black cops are trained by the IDF. So all the, that famous knee on the neck position that has killed so many Black men, it was created by Israel.
Doesn't surprise me, which is why. Go ahead. Sorry, go ahead.
So they're very connected. Like power in America, which we see exerted through the criminal justice system and the policing, is very much connected to Israel. They get their training, and it's all the same stuff that we see. That the way that Palestinians are oppressed physically, violently, it's the same way Black men and women are oppressed through policing in America. And they're so worried about, the average Black person realizing that connection and that kind of like, can you imagine the solidarity? Like if every Black person in America rose up in support of Palestine, they'd be fucked.
That's what we've been advocating for with the international anti-imperialist movement, where we drop all oppression Olympics. Fuck oppression Olympics. No comparing who has it the worst. No, you didn't fight for me. What about no. How about we unite against the common cause? And a lot of Black people, especially younger Black people, realize this. I will admit, a lot of the Black boomers are cooked if the propaganda, but younger Black people. Yeah. And polls after polls, and this is the story I was looking for. Yeah. Look at this headline. This will be the last story we cover. I would just love to get your reaction to it. Pro-Israel ADL spied on African American activists over opposition to U.S.-Israel police exchange programs. So many of these stories, they'll spy on this person. They keep tabs on Black activists. So when ADL called me out, for example, you guys think that they didn't have tabs on RBN for months before that?
And that's why what you're doing is a form of resistance. Like, keep doing it, brother. I'm so happy that you do what you do, and I'll always come back when you invite me on the show.
I definitely will have you back on soon. It was a very enjoyable conversation. The last thing I would say is look at this headline, and this headline actually kind of boils my blood because the Zionists, they can't help but steal everything. They steal Palestinian food. They steal Palestinian recipes. They call it Israeli recipes. They steal Palestinian clothes. They steal everything. They steal it by culture. They steal so much from the Palestinians. They're even stealing their long-standing ties with Black solidarity groups. It was the Black Panthers, my friends, who had solidarity with the Palestinians. It was Nelson Mandela that had solidarity with the Palestinians, who had solidarity with African Americans. But you guys see how the Zionist Jews, they're trying to steal that too. Look, this headline is insane. Black American solidarity with Palestinians is rising and testing long-standing ties to Jewish allies. What long-standing ties? You mean the same Zionists in the 60s who opposed the civil rights movement? Who do you guys think the pastors who was the opposition to the civil rights movement, who do you guys think they were? They was Christian Zionists. But you guys see how they're trying to erase history? They're trying to pretend that they wipe out the Palestinian culture, and now they're trying to pretend that Jewish people was close to Black people, even though a lot of these motherfuckers were financing the slave trade. But that's a conversation a lot of you guys are not ready for. But that's why this headline is absurd. Anyway, Sabrina, I already took a lot of your time. We gotta do this. We gotta do this more often. Always great having you on. Always very thought provoking.
So
Any
great.
final thoughts? Anything you want to promote?
Nothing. Promote, like, I don't know. Follow me if you want to hear more of my ranting and you know and the things I have to say. But no, just thank you for having me. It was it's always a great pleasure, and I look forward to coming back soon. Inshallah.
Yeah, for sure. Make sure you guys follow Dr. Sabrina. Always great tweets. I will have another hotspot video coming out as well. Yesterday hotspot was very fun to make. We have a follow-up. I already kind of covered it during the beginning of the stream, but you have CEOs that are so scared that they are removing their Wikipedia pages. They're removing their websites. They're floating the idea of doing insurance reform. So that's my next hotspot video. So we will have more content later today. So keep an eye out for that. And I will be back next week, guys. Next week is an absolute banger. This week was a banger. I had Dr. Sabrina on, everybody. But we also have Dan Cohen joining Monday. Vanessa Beasley is finally joining us on Wednesday. We have banger after banger. We have Syria analysis join us on Friday. Banger after banger after banger after banger. Thank you guys, my friend. Have a good weekend.